Dr. Edward Fergus is a professor at urban education in the School of Arts and Sciences at Rutgers University, Newark. Prior to joining Rutgers University, Newark, Dr. Fergus was an associate professor of urban education at Temple University. He also served as assistant professor of the Educational Leadership and Policy at NYU and a deputy director in Metropolitan Center of Urban Education at New York University. He was a former, and I love this part, he was a former high school studies teacher. Let's give it up for teachers. Come on, I love that. A program developer and a community school program director. Then he has continuously approached research that dealt with some very important educational equity topics. Topics such as special education, suspensions of Black boys. All right, he also did work on Black and Latino boys' academic and social engagement outcomes and disproportionality in those two spaces that I just mentioned, special education and suspension. He also did research, extensive research on school climate. And wasn't the session we had on school climate powerful earlier? So let's just clap it up for that. That was awesome. He has a plethora of books and research, and I invite you to look at his bio. Why? Because this is the type of data that we need to study. Building an equity consciousness is not enough to just know things are not fair, right? But it's getting the information, the data, the strategies in order to overcome them. What I love that he's the co-author of Schooling for Resilience, Improving Trajectory of Black and Latino Boys. And he has a forthcoming book, which sounds extremely interesting, Boyhood and Masculinity Construction. Everybody say, ooh. That is a good one. And so he also has a bachelor's in political science and secondary education, a broad field social studies from Beloit College, and a doctorate in educational policy and social foundations from the University of Michigan. And he is here today to do a very interesting talk on a subject that I just want to make sure I get absolutely correct. So just let me turn to this page. And his, okay, I'm looking for this lunch panel. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong section. All right, his keynote would be on, very specifically, innovating educational equity approach, the implications of a bias-based beliefs on our policy and our practice. And he's gonna help us reimagine schools, so they can be safe for our children and all student ready. Please help me give a very warm welcome to Dr. Edward Fergus.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I want to be mindful of not interrupting too much of your lunch, because I know how important it is for us to get nourished. And as we are especially taking this time to understand and kind of really think about educational equity, I'm so excited to kind of have this opportunity to be in Newark. I am brand spanking new. I just got on to Rutgers University as faculty as of September 1 in the Department of Urban Ed. It was a journey to get here. I have been to several universities, and I think I realized this was where I should have been a while ago. So I'm super excited to be here. Today, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this because I really just want to sort of really lay into something that I always think about, this particular story that a colleague of mine said to me about 25 years ago when I was in grad school. And he was a faculty mentor. And one of the things he said to me was about having kids of color in school. And he always told me the story that every year when he started school, he would go to the teachers of his kids and say, hey, you know, if you mess up their language, English language arts, that's okay, because I can fix that, right? As a parent at home, I can help with the reading, right? I can reinforce the reading. If you mess up their math, you know, I can go possibly hire a tutor, get somebody who may know some math in my neighborhood, right? But he said, but if you mess with their identity and who they are, then we're really going to have a problem. And that really sat with me. That has always stayed with me. And my kids are now 22 and 18. And I tell you this, that has definitely been the mantra that I have kept up as I have gone every year to back to school nights, to get to know the teachers of my kids, to understand sort of what is it that they are seeing in my kids? Are they seeing the same level of love and care and possibilities in my kids as I see? And I'm sure as many of you who are parents who are in this room are constantly thinking about, are the adults that are surrounding my kids ready to love them at the level in which I need them to be loved, the level in which I need you all to understand the potential that they carry? So I say this because part of my own research work for a long time has centered in trying to understand educational policy, right? Like, what's the right types of policies that we need to be doing? But I've realized over time that it also matters that we pay attention to the mindsets that develop policy, right? A great example is, is discipline policy, right? The ways in which discipline policy is laid out in schools, right? Most often, discipline policy is laid out in such a way that it's oriented towards punishment, right? We're going to punish kids. It's less about how do we support kids. And that takes two different mindsets to work from: a punishment mindset versus a support mindset. And so this attention to mindset is not something new, right? It actually goes back to, and this is where my social studies background comes in as a former social studies teacher. Perfect. I was wondering. Thank you. No, I'm like, how am I advancing the slides? Thank you. It really goes back to a very important historical moment, which was Brown versus Board of Education, right? When there was a decision made, a moral imperative that we need to desegregate schools, it wasn't just about creating greater access for schools, for our kids, right? To make sure they have the facilities they need. There was also another element that was happening, which came out of a study that was done by Kenneth and Mamie Clark in 1947, which is what it's called a doll study, right? Where black children were asked to consider which dolls do they consider are the dolls that are friendliest, the dolls that they like, the dolls that they don't like, right? And so they did this study with black children using both black dolls and white dolls. And what came out of that study was basically that black children were holding inferior ideas about themselves, right? And the question became, well, where does this come from, right? How is this constantly sort of being fed? What's the diet that's being offered up that carries that idea? So we know that what Brown versus Board was really trying to get us to do was to make sure that we got greater facilities. But what Brown versus Board also was encouraging us to do was to begin demystifying and interrupting those types of mindsets, right? That experience that our black children are having in particular, but not just black children, our Latinx kids, our Native American kids who were who continue to be on reservations, who were enveloped in this idea that there's something wrong with them, right? But as much as we may have strategized around creating greater opportunity around facilities through a desegregation approach, we didn't have an approach for how do we interrupt that sense of inferiority, right? So what is that national strategy? What's that national curriculum for what I like to say for us to get along, right? And it's been a long journey that we have taken in education, and we haven't made the right steps all the time. This particular letter here, I always use it because this is a letter from a superintendent in 1953 to a black teacher. What most folks don't know is between 1954 and 1964, of the 82,000 black teachers that were employed across the country, 38,000 were fired or demoted. Why? Because when we desegregated, there wasn't a desegregation that also impacted our teaching staff, particularly our black teachers. And so this particular letter, as you can read on this letter, that the superintendent starts off by saying, due to the present uncertainty about the future, about enrollment next year in schools for Negro children, it is not possible at this time to offer you employment for next year. If the Supreme Court should rule that segregation in elementary grades is unconstitutional, our board will proceed on the assumption that the majority of people in Topeka will not want to employ Negro teachers next year for white children. It is necessary for me to notify you now that your services will not be needed for next year. This is in compliance with the continuing contract law. I believe that whatever happens will ultimately turn out to be best for everybody concerned. Sincerely, Wendell Godwin, Superintendent of Schools. This letter says a lot, doesn't it? It says it all. It says not only sort of, okay, fine, we're going to desegregate, but we're still going to hold on to some of these notions of inferiority that we have about black people. And in particular, it's being applied to black teachers. But I think we can also extend it out to, if they're not seeing the worthwhileness, the asset of having black teachers also be part of the integration strategy, then they're also not seeing black children as assets as part of the integration strategy. So the question that we have to struggle with in trying to innovate around educational equity that we haven't had a national strategy around, right, is how is it that we interrupt this type of, this approach, particularly given the fact that there's so many other factors that are surrounding us that continue to perpetuate us not having or not developing this national curriculum, right? In social psychology, they call it not having enough cross-cultural experiences, right? So where are the moments where we get to do this? One of the studies that's done that I love when they do this every year. It's from the Public Religion Research Institute. I call it the "Who do you hang out with" study, right? Where they look at who are your close friendships, right? And so in this particular study, they highlighted, they've done it twice so far, in 2013 and 2022. And they asked folks to highlight who are your close friendship networks and what are their racial ethnic background. And what you see on these graphs is that across all groups, there's a lot in which we are spending what we call sort of affinity connections, right? Connections with people that are just like us on an ongoing basis, particularly those who are closest to us, right? And I always say there's nothing wrong with having close friendships with people that are like you, that support you, that create a level of identity safety. But the question becomes, where does it allow for us to also extend to develop cross-cultural capacities? And I'm always applying it and thinking about our kids. Because when their kids are showing up to school, right? And I'm going to go back to that story that faculty mentor said to me, right? So what happens when my kids show up in a school where they're surrounded by adults who are unfamiliar with their potential, who may not create their level of identity safety, right? So what do we do to kind of really recognize that this is constantly there, right? So we're not only consuming this experience of segregated lives, not only through our friendship networks, but we also have it in what we're consuming. You know, I'm gonna tell this, I call it now my Band-Aid story. About a couple of months ago, you know, I cut myself on my hand, and I'm kind of stubborn. I didn't go to urgent care. You know, it bled for 3 or 4 days, and I finally said, I need to go to urgent care. Yes, I know. My wife yelled at me about it. She was like, it's about time you go. Well, and I had Band-Aids in the house. I had these Band-Aids. And then I was like, you know, I remember somebody telling me that there's Band-Aids that are actually my skin color. So I went to Target, and these are my pictures. I actually took these pictures, okay? Can I tell you, I bought all 6 boxes. Because I was just fascinated that I was like, what? And not just brown, different shades of brown, right? How powerful it is to have an opportunity to reconstruct the idea of what we've normalized is what is Band-Aid, right? So I fast forward, I go to urgent care, I have these new Band-Aids on my hand, right? And the nurse, white woman, and she's like, okay, so what is it? And I tell her, and I said, and it's right here. And she looks at the Band-Aid, she's like, what is that? I said, it's a Band-Aid, and it's my skin color. And she's like, I've never seen that before. I don't know, why didn't we ever think of that? I said, and that is the problem. Because we've normalized the way in which we have seen this as but this is how we think of Band-Aids, right? I got tons of stories. Another one. This is another way in which we are missing an opportunity to really understand the potential of our kids. This is a textbook that McGraw-Hill, which is a large publishing company, developed with the state education department in Texas. And they published this in 2015. And in case you're wondering, it's still in circulation, right? And as you can catch here, and I'm a social studies person, so for me, I love that this, somebody caught this. As you read the caption here, the Atlantic slave trade between 1500s and 1800s brought millions of workers from Africa to the southern United States. Now, I think workers is different than slaves. Workers get some benefits. They get time off, right? They can get out of the sun, right? If it gets too hot, right? And so the concern becomes how these things become normalized, how we have not had a national curriculum that allows for us to really pay attention to this. Okay, one last one. Charles Schulz writes in his autobiography that when he introduced Franklin, and you all remember Franklin? You all know Franklin? He introduced Franklin in 1968. And he introduced Franklin, and he could not have Franklin sitting on the same side as the rest of the Peanuts gang. Right? Because that was not the type of integration that was desired. Even in the cartoons, we couldn't allow our kids to kind of see the potential of their difference being an asset sitting at the same table. I've shown this picture so many different times with teachers, and they're like, Franklin doesn't even have a regular chair like everybody else, right? He's sitting in a lawn chair, right? But the idea of what it means for us, like what is it going to take for us to build out a national curriculum for us to really address these issues, right? So we have to be cognizant that all of this stuff is filling what I like to call the shopping cart, the social shopping cart of our lives, right? And it's the title of, I have 2 books actually coming out. Don't ask me how both are getting done, but they got to get done because I signed the contracts. But this last one is really paying attention to the idea that there's a social shopping cart that we've all been carrying around that has all of these set of ideas, right? That we've normalized Band-Aids to look a very particular way, that we've normalized and accepted the ways in which Franklin sits on one side of the table, separate from the Peanuts gang, and so forth and so forth. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is, one, when are we going to take the opportunity to unpack what has been in there historically, and what are we going to do, and what's our replacement strategy regarding this? So my work has really centered around what does it mean for, it's not just, I know how to work with districts around how to support them around changing discipline policy. This policy around how to ensure that all of our kids getting access to gifted AP and honors classes, or making sure that we have appropriate identification patterns around special education. But what we have not worked on, and what has been really at the center of what I've been paying attention to for the last 10 years is, how do we unpack and replace the mindsets that have to reframe the type of discipline policy gifted AP and honors work? Because what we don't want is, we don't want the mindset that we have yet to have a national curriculum around to be the same mindset that drives the remedy work that we do. And so the question that I have us that consider, particularly is thinking about sort of as we're going to have our great panel coming up, is who are invested in the development of a community, right? And particularly the development, and because our attention here at this conference is around educational equity, the development of the adults who sit in front and work with our kids, right? What does it look like for us to really invest in not only just do they know the right methods? Are they cutting edge in terms of their knowledge base? But what is also the way in which we are ensuring that we are cultivating the types of beliefs and mindsets, right, that they're bringing into the classrooms, into the hallways, into the cafeterias of all of our schools, because our kids are deserving of those types of opportunities. So I implore us to, that as we work here today and over these 2 days, and I'm so excited that the mayor has really sort of paid attention to this idea of innovating educational equity, is that it includes an attention to what's the mindsets and beliefs that our kids need to have adults who stand in front of them. So I'm gonna leave you with this. We gotta figure out what this diet is. We've gotta have a very particular diet. I'm a food person. I'm standing up here hungry as well, right? So I'm conscious of what's the level of protein that needs to be here, the veggies, the carbs that are appropriate for us to have to really ensure that our kids are getting the types of opportunity that make the most sense for for them to have the future that has not been made available to many of us. So I'm going to pause here, and I want to thank you all for indulging me for this moment. But I really want to now invite our esteemed panel to come up, who are going to not only sort of have an opportunity to engage us in conversation around the work that they're getting to do, but also an opportunity for them to talk to each other around sort of the work that they're getting to do. So I'm going to pause here and allow our panel to come up, and then I'll introduce them. Very good. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh. Thank you. You tell me. Okay, sit. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. So I'm gonna. So as our panel, I'm gonna introduce who our panelists are. Who are many of you are probably very familiar with our panel here. I'm going to start first with Dr. Nancy Cantor, who is the Chancellor of Rutgers University, Newark. Thank you, Nancy. Next, we have Dr. Boakye. I want to make sure I pronounce it. Dr. Boakye, who is president of Essex County College. Thank you for coming. Next, we have Dr. Rupert Hales, president of Pillar College. Thank you. And lastly, Dr. Take. Oh, thank you, Dr. Lim, president of NJIT. Thank you. Thank you for hosting. Well, thank you all for coming. You know, one of the things as this planning was happening, you know, all I kept thinking was like, what a great opportunity to have presidents of universities, right, to really be able to sit on the stage together, right, and engage the community around this such important topic around developing sort of the educational equity that we need. But I want to start first by sort of allowing each one of you to really to have an opportunity to lay out your thoughts around sort of what does it mean for your institutions, right, to pay attention to these issues of educational equity, the ways in which, you know, whether it's sort of thinking about how we are thinking about the resilience of our children, or the young adults that you all get, right, at your campuses, and that you are developing them into their next future. So we'll start there and allowing each one of you to have a few minutes to kind of share your thoughts around sort of your educational equity sort of mission work that you're doing. I don't know if we want to go whichever order we want to go. We'll start with Dr. Lim, since this is your campus, so.
Sure, thank you so much. Well, you know, first of all, we have been at NJIT even before my time here. By the way, just so you know, this is my 119th day on the job, July 1st. A lot of the work that I'll talk about, really, I want to attribute that to my predecessor, Dr. Joe Bloom, who has had a tremendous partnership with the City of Newark and also with Mayor Baraka. First of all, NJIT for many years now has intensified our effort, okay, to intentionally work on DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiative across the campus. So a lot of good work has happened. What I'm trying to do coming here into my presidency, and I'm the 9th president of NJIT, is to really supercharge it, to steepen the slope so that we can get there faster. We have pre-college program. We have program for students who are already here. And we have also programs that would help some of our alumni to be successful. Because if you think about it, I was at Bloomberg yesterday talking about inclusivity and belonging in the tech workplace. We're producing STEM workforce. Our alumni, many of them are very diverse. They are facing challenges even out there. So we're looking at a three-pronged approach to help them. And the way we would want to do that, okay, is all these programs that I'll share later on as we go into this panel talk, but is to make, first of all, this place as welcoming, as inclusive as possible. We have to start right here, okay? And to do that, okay, we have to understand that diversity is actually good for business. Diversity is good for business. We build, we produce professionals. And because we're a Polytech University, so we're STEM focused, professional that does what? That makes things, that build things, that design system for who? For humanity, and humanity is very diverse. So if you're gonna do that, okay, and you can't just have one race doing all the work for the rest of the world. We have to have participation, inclusion. So I think that's our mantra, to support that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. For me, we're a Christian institution. And so one of the key scriptures I tell every single student, staff, professional is when, if you indulge me, when Jesus challenged Peter. He said, "Do you love me?" And Peter didn't respond. Jesus said, "Feed my lamb." He said, "Do you love me?" And he said, "Feed my sheep." And he said, "Do you love me, Peter?" And Peter said, "Lord, you know everything. Why are you asking me this question?" And he said, "Take care of my sheep." And what I tell every single staff member is every single students that coming through that door represent a sheep. And we're going to take care of them. We're going to love them. We're going to make sure that whatever they need, we're there to support them. And I have gone one step further at the institution, and we have implemented a program focusing on intercultural communication, IDI, and every single leader has been gone through and trained and making sure that they're certified in understanding, because we're not monolithic anymore. We're getting all different kinds of people from all different backgrounds coming into the institution. So it's not just the faculty that has to be prepared, the administration has to be prepared, the president has to be prepared. And so that's kind of the focus that I've taken, is that we're going to be prepared, because whoever is coming to our institution, we have to be prepared to take care of them. So that's kind of our approaches. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you. I just want to say this quickly. About a week ago, I attended a meeting like this. And when I introduced myself and I said I work at Essex County College and I'm the president there, I met a pastor who came after me and said, "Sir, I want to thank you." And I said, "Why do you want to thank me?" He said, "About 17 years ago, I was looking for a place for my wife to attend a college or a university. Unfortunately, they walk around several schools and she was not given opportunity. So finally, they came to Essex County College, and as I speak today, the lady is a medical doctor. She is in one of the big hospitals in New York, and she's also teaching in one of the universities as a visiting professor, providing for the community and also for the family. At Essex County College, I know a number of you here might have had opportunity to step there or study there, or a family member. We believe in open access to everybody. However, after working in the college for about 13 years before becoming the president of the college, I thought that it's time for us to do things a little bit different. So I have actually reevaluated what access means. Does access means just opening the door for people to walk in? And how do we even do that? So we've done a number of things. As we go ahead, I will share with you what have we done when we even talk about the access part. Mm-hmm. And also, when you even bring people in smoothly, what happened? What is next? So we had to look at the success part of it. And therefore, now my words are two: access to success. Access to success. And that is what I think at this stage, all the things that we are doing are mapping into. And I believe that if we're able to give people the opportunity and we support them to become successful, we're not just supporting a small number of people in a family or a small number of people in a church or in any organization. We are not supporting just a few people in the town or the city, but we're actually rebuilding a new world. Thank you.
Well, I just want to build on what my colleagues have said, that what we're doing at Rutgers Newark is essentially arguing the asset model that Dr. Fergus just talked about. I mean, that is that we in this country have had 40-odd years of ridiculous so-called colorblind approaches. There's nothing colorblind about colorblindness. And let's remember that on Monday when the Supreme Court, on Halloween, hears the affirmative action cases. And I want to argue, the reason I want to mention this is that affirmative action is not just going to overturn particular ways of access to college. All of us are engaged in tremendous amounts of work on dual enrollment, on pathways, on building freedom schools in Newark, on access in every way. But what if they reverse affirmative action? It will allow people in this country to believe that color blindness is the way to be. Color blindness is built on that Atlantic slave trade.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
Not worker trade,
Right.
slave trade. And even worse, color blindness is built on the notion that there's no asset to color, culture, language to build upon. So what we're doing at Rutgers Newark is thinking deeply at every level in terms of faculty, who's at the table, staff, are Newarkers hired and at the table, thinking about our students in terms of their lived experience. So when we do a prison education program in every prison in New Jersey, and then a re-entry college education program at Rutgers Newark for formerly incarcerated, we're not just being nice and charitable. We are bringing the lived experience and knowledge of what mass incarceration has been and done to the people of this city, of this region, of this state, of this country, bringing it directly to the table and empowering the voices. When we do a program on lives in translation, so that people who can bring incredible linguistic skills from home languages to the table as empowered translators in our immigration law clinic, as empowered contact tracers during COVID for the city of Newark. Our students have so much to bring to the table if we allow that to be colorful in its full force at the table.
Thank you, because what you all four have kind of highlighted is the necessary need for us to really be colorful, to be color brave, in an environment that's it is, and I can't remember who sort of highlighted for us that we're not a monolith, and we see that reality of not being a monolith in simple things like the Band-Aids that we use, right? So let's be clear about sort of what it means for us to move beyond that monolith, to be this color brave sort of environment. And I love that each one of you kind of share the work, the programming that you're doing on your campuses. And I'm wondering, as you're doing this work, whether it's on campus or whether it's in collaboration with partners, but what are some of the challenges that you all find are occurring? I think, Nancy is highlighting, a particular challenge that we're going to be facing, right, as these cases are heard on Monday, right? The potential impact, right? And I'm wondering from your vantage point, like, what have been some of these, additional sets of challenges that, as you all are pushing forward in terms of this color brave, colorful orientation in what you're doing on your campuses? What are those challenges? And in some ways, for us as a community to know where may be the hot spots or ways in which we can kind of think about supportive of how do we sort of help to help address or be a partner around some of these challenges. So I'll leave it open to whoever wants to go first.
So I just want to quickly say, from my point of view, that one of the ways in which we are color brave is to understand how individuals bring a whole community to the table. So when I think about what we're doing with our Are You Dreamers, what we're doing when we think about what this country is doing to immigrant families who have built this country over so many generations, and this city over so many generations of migration and immigration, but we are putting all kinds of obstacles in their way. So one way to think about challenge is that it is the flip side of the opportunity of taking communities seriously. So during COVID, we couldn't do prison education in the prisons because there was no technology that you could do at the table, but we did it anyway. When I look at the food insecurity of so many of our students, we have an enormous food pantry, which is an opportunity. We have an opportunity in the food pantry to work with the Urban Agriculture Cooperative in this area and think about sustainability and create the next generation of sustainable eaters. But we can turn those challenges into opportunities. Again, if we take what individuals are bringing from the community to the table and we coordinate around those realities.
Just to add to what Nancy said, when it comes to college, nowadays most of you have heard about it or you have experienced it, about the cost of education. It's very expensive to go to school.
Yes.
And that is one thing those of us who have been in the system are hoping that something is done about it. Because even if you open the door and the person comes in the first semester, there is a huge bill in front of them. Or even if they're able to go through the school, and at the end of the day, they have a student loan debt that is bigger than even buying a house, we are actually sending a message to everybody that school is not for you. And this is one of the things that we are all advocating for, and we need a bigger community to kind of work with us to fight this. You know that even at the colleges we have what you call financial aid. But a few things that people may not be aware of. How many people get a financial aid? Is it for everybody? No. There are caps. If your parents are trying to make something for the entire family, sometimes you have the mothers and the fathers who have to take care of the kids and also the older parents and take care of all other things. And you cap the amount people need to bring home before they can qualify for financial aid at a smaller level. It means that you are actually cutting many people from getting the financial aid. Again, the application process is even harder for a number of people to even go through. Even if they qualify for financial aid, they can't get it. Right. We have a system where for many years, a lot of people have to get high score of SAT before they can even go to colleges. These are some of the things we are trying to look into it. And just recently, I've become the president for 2 years. And what I have done is expanded the other alternative options for giving people opportunity to come to the college without necessarily having SAT score.
Well, from my vantage point, one of the things that I've been hammering, for lack of a better word, with my administration is the concept of consistency. And I really believe that if you're consistent, it doesn't matter what the person is, what color they are, you're going to treat them consistently. And so, from my vantage point, I have told folks, whether it's an Hispanic, whether it's an African American, whether it's an Asian person that comes through the door, we're going to make sure that we're treating them the same way that we would treat another person. Beyond that, the difficulty that we have, and from my perspective, there are two things I always think about when you're trying to make change. You think about climate and culture. Culture has to do with language. It has to do with who we say we are. It has to do with how we speak. That's culture. Climate has to do with behavior. So you don't change culture, you change climate to impact culture. And so what I have to do for my senior leaders is to make sure that their behavior is what people see, their behavior is what the students see, their behavior as a faculty member is what people see, and then if you're caring for them, you're going to be consistent and make sure that whatever they experience, it's a good experience.
Right.
In the military, and I'm an ex-military officer, we have this thing called blue on blue. And blue on blue has to do with what we call friendly fire. And friendly fire is among each other.
Right.
And in our environment, we have too many friendly fire, meaning we're on a mission here to help the student graduate. We want to make sure the student get educated. But we can't be fighting one another and trying to helping the student graduate.
Right, right.
And so I have just been pushing as hard as I possibly can to make sure, one, there's consistency. Because with consistency, this is the last thing I'll say on this. If you set up a guideline, and the guideline is nebulous, I use this term all the time, guideline within a framework that is nebulous is neither a guideline nor a framework, it's discrimination. If you set up guidelines and it's not clear, people are going to get discriminated against. And we have to make sure we're clear on that. So that's kind of what I preach all the time. Thank you.
I wholeheartedly agree with all the comments made by my colleagues here. I'm going to focus my remarks on STEM, being New Jersey's state only public polytechnic university. And what I'm going to say, okay, is, first of all, many of you know that a STEM degree is very, very useful. And it's really a ticket to an upward mobility in a socio-economic status. I always tell my students, the day that you receive a degree in engineering, in science, fintech, you automatically move 1 or 2 levels up in your socio-economic status. And you impact multi-generation down the road. The question is, how do we get enough minority students to enjoy that benefit? Right. And to me, I think at NJIT, one of the challenge, okay, is affordability. I'm making it a priority, okay, to ensure that every student that is able to get admitted to NJIT, who wants to be successful here, because talent is really everywhere, that they have the opportunity. And NJIT, like many other public institutions here, it is our duty to make it affordable, to create the opportunity for these many students there. I actually applaud one of the recent initiative of the National Science Foundation. There's something called the missing millions. And the definition of the missing millions, okay, is if you take the population of those who are involved in research, in science, in STEM, and then you compare that to the population of the entire community, that difference, okay, is what we call the missing millions. And if you do that calculation, the missing millions are where? Are in the underrepresented minority. And when you have that, okay, that is a problem. So I applaud National Science Foundation initiative to want to find these missing millions, because everyone has to participate to benefit from that. And it goes down the road multi-generational, not just from a family viewpoint, but also from the career viewpoint. If we don't have a lot of kids participating in STEM, we won't be able to have the pipeline of faculty that we can hire, who can then be empowered, okay, to really motivate and be an example for the students that we bring in. So it's a vicious cycle that we want to break. And so I'm committed to supporting that. That's really, really key. Now, we are actually doing pretty well, I think. Again, my 119 days on the job, so this is not my, I won't claim that I did this. President Joe Bloom had a lot of hands in this. We actually graduate, believe me or not, more than 60%, 62% to be exact, of all engineering degrees, okay, are awarded to minority students in New Jersey. So 62%, 62% of the engineers that are now practicing out in New Jersey, all in the minority, who have minority background, all came from NJIT. I think that's a phenomenal statistic. We need to do better. Okay, we need to do a lot better than that. And all of us need to be, in it to do it.
It is. That's amazing. I'm so glad. Thank you so much for sharing all of those, not only sort of the ways in which you all talked about these being challenges, but also ways in which you have found your way through addressing those challenges, right? Because it's one thing to do an autopsy of a challenge. It's another to actually deal with it. And so I really want to applaud you all for being and sharing sort of what that is. As we, I think. Well, reading my mind, right? So it's as a last, sort of comment from each one of you. I'd really love for you all to kind of share your sort of future thinking as we are thinking about, understanding sort of the educational equity that we know that our kids need. And I'm so glad that you all are touching on the recognition that our kids our students who are showing up at our schools are coming with a lot of different sets of needs, right, that our universities, our colleges are needing to address, right? Because our society just hasn't had enough of the safety nets to make sure that our colleges are ready to kind of, and universities are ready to support that. I love that you all are tending to recognizing the need to remove such barriers like SATs. Recognizing the impossibility of filling out the FAFSA. As a parent who has been filling it out for years now, I am so tired, and I don't understand it. And finally, sort of recognizing sort of what does it mean for us to, and thank you so much for sharing sort of the missing millions, right? And sort of the idea that we have populations that are missing from particular fields is such a vital sort of recognition that we need to have. But we'd love to kind of hear your last thoughts as you all are continue to think forward around innovating around educational equity. What do you see as sort of some of the things that your future thinking is sort of touching on or thinking through as a last thought for our community here in Newark?
Well, I'll put the elephant in the room here, the pandemic. How can you not remember what happened in the pandemic? Many people suffer, don't get me wrong, we don't want a pandemic.
Right.
But the pandemic also revealed this. It reveals great inequality, great intolerance to a segment of the society. It didn't impact the entire segment of the society equally. I would say that, other than that I have to wear a mask, I have to get vaccinated, I have to be careful when I'm around people, it didn't really impact me a whole lot, me personally, right? But I noticed that some of my students, I came from Texas. I was at the University of Texas in Arlington. The demographic of students there is very similar to NJIT. Many first-generation students, many low-income families send their kids to University of Texas at Arlington. They were greatly impacted by the pandemic. Wow. And then on top of that, we went online. They couldn't go online.
Right.
Many of them don't have internet at home. Many of them have no access to laptop, to Wi-Fi. So the pandemic really reveals the inequality and intolerance that we have created in this society. Yeah. So we need to do something about that. Now, the silver lining, again, I never want to wish for a pandemic because many people suffer from that. The silver lining behind the pandemic is it pushes higher ed far out into the future. Right. That makes us think about how we can do things differently. We're going through a digital revolution now, the higher ed. I think at NJIT, being a technology school, we have to embrace technology and make technology to help us equalize this inequality and intolerance. When during the pandemic, many schools, at least here, including here in NJIT, we make sure that students have access to Wi-Fi, to laptop, to hotspot, so they can continue their education. Yeah. Moving forward, we have to think about how technology can be infused into all facets of our life, teaching, learning, research, engagement, so that the missing millions, won't have to be missing anymore. We can find them in doing that. So that's my commitment as the incoming president at NJIT.
Wonderful, thank you.
continue on the line of COVID. I've been at Pillar for over 3 years now, and I remember coming to one board meeting at one point in time, and the first board meeting I went to, I remember one of the members saying, "Okay, we will never be online. We'll never go to online." And then COVID showed up, and everybody had to be online, and we had to do some rapid application implementation in order for us to get there. But even after we got there, we recognize it's one thing to put technology in place. It's a whole nother ball game to get the people who are using the technology to understand the technology and be able to use the technology comfortably. And so we had faculty, we had students that had to be trained specially. We had to provide dollars for them in order for them to get additional training. And so the COVID, to your point, really impacted every single one of us. Not only, we have in person, but there is online. But then there is this hybrid thing. This hybrid thing says, okay, there's, I taught a class this last week, there's another person, there's one student in Florida, there's another student in Michigan, there's another student in West Virginia, and there's 3 or 15 students in Newark. That's the new normal, and we have to prepare for them for that. The last thing I'll say on this is, we recognize it, especially in the urban area. Pillar College is in a lot of urban areas. We're in Newark, we're in Patterson, we're in Plainfield. Just opened up a new instructional site in Jersey City, so we try to go into the urban areas. We recognize, the research says that if an African-American student sees an African-American parent or an African-American teacher in the classroom, they're 13% more likely to go to college. If they see 2 African-American instructor, they're 39% more likely to go to school. That's huge. So knowing that, one of the things I've committed to, we actually went out in the first cohort of students we brought in. We call it the Black Elementary School Teachers Program, and we got funding to make sure black male students can actually be trained so that they can be in the classroom, so that those that are minorities can see them. Because one of the things, as an ex-pastor, I also tell my associates is, if someone comes into a church and they do not see themselves on the stage, you lost them. And so the representation that you need to have, you make sure that you have that representation, and so the same representation we'll have as we go forward at Pillar College. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to add to what my 2 friends have just shared, at Essex County College, 2 things that I observed, which I felt like immediately I had to do something with, even though they coincided with the COVID, but I was able to draw the line. I said, this is something we need to do something about it. Many people have entered into the college. When they come in the prior years, everybody was assumed to be like, you're not ready for the college. They set up different levels of developmental courses for students. So you could sit in the developmental courses for about a year, 2 years, and you haven't even started the college program. And that, to me, is one of the biggest barriers. Because by the time they spend 2 years, they're almost done using all the financial aid allocated for them, and they haven't started the college. So immediately had to reorganize and make sure that we make some changes to recreate a different path for people to move ahead straight into the college program. And I can say this, that within the last 2 years, those who graduated in 2020, the graduation rate was 11%. Then last year, we moved to 14.6, and this year, 16.7. You could see that if we do things differently, we're going to see different results, different outcomes. Finally, I just want to say that as teachers, as educators, we have always set up policies, regulations, rules, and always feel like we are the leaders and everybody comes should follow us. But my understanding and the way that I'm narrating things with my staff and faculty is that if we are truly meeting students where they are, then when we meet them, We rather have to position them in front of us and guide them to move, because we cannot continue to accept that people who are coming in have no knowledge, or they don't have this and we have everything. We need to understand that they have more to offer in the process, and we are supposed to support them whilst they move into the successful path. Thank you.
So I want to build exactly on that last point and say that I think our biggest issue is really how to collaborate, how to bring all of the community knowledge to the table and to do it together. That's why we're all in the Newark City of Learning Collaborative. That's why we're all working with the Newark Board of Education and with all the schools in Newark, because there is so much community knowledge to bring to the table. And we've got to create a pathway through dual enrollment so that all of the students in Newark feel that this is the place they own. And not just NJIT, not just this. I'm kidding. That they own all the institutions, all the places here, and that their knowledge will be valued. And then we got to create the teachers from our student body. And so the urban education department that Dr. Fergus is part of is critical in our minds to create, putting the people in the classrooms, back in the classrooms in Newark, who actually come from Newark. And one of the reasons that we created the Run to the Top full last-in scholarship at Rutgers Newark for Newark residents and for all county college transfers, because the vast majority of first-generation students will have their first touch of higher ed at a community college. One of the reasons we created that is indeed so that we have the student bodies who organically and authentically come from this city and will then bring back to the classrooms, to what they're doing in STEAM or in STEM. They will bring back that knowledge and make the change that needs to be made out in the world.
Thank you so much. Can we give a round of applause to this panel, please? Again, the opportunity to have the leaders of the higher ed institutions in our communities to sit here and talk to us about what they're offering and how they're doing it is so vitally important. I so appreciate this. Thank you all so much for stealing this time. Thank you all for being here. I think I need to turn it back over to Dr. Brown, who's going to guide us on to the next segment of our session. But I want to invite our panelists to step off the stage while Dr. Brown hands us over. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You did a good job. Thank you. You guys were powerful.
Thank you. You got it.
Let's give them another round of applause. That's powerful. We've heard on so many levels. I think that if I can give feedback to this own conference, the only place that I feel like we haven't heard enough from, and that's early childhood. Right, and that is something we're working on, and I see, but I'm so excited to have the college presidents and the chancellor come up and really talk about some of the equity issues they're dealing with in college. And I just want to commend them. They're doing, and Mayor Baraka talked about how he first developed that relationship with Joe Bloom at NJIT and started that narrative to get dual enrollment running in Newark Board of Education. But I want to applaud how rapidly it has grown and how all the colleges have invested. So I want to take this time to thank Mayor Baraka for pushing the envelope with Joe Bloom, and I want to thank all the colleges in Newark for changing the narrative. Do you know how many Newark students are graduating with an associate's degree? It is beautiful. It is a beautiful, beautiful, and I don't want to misquote, but I'm believing that Eastside was one of the first to get this started. Don't misquote me, but I'm just giving it. And I know Bard Bard is also, and I believe, and if I'm correct, Westside has joined that particular team, and I think that Westside just graduated, and I hate giving out numbers, about 16 graduates with associate's degree, and this is their first time engaging in that program. So let's give them a round of applause. And I want to applaud you that this is the conversation to talk about funding, because I know at Central and places like that, the school had to take on that burden. And you had to be super creative. And I think that we really should engage and look at funding so it's an option that every single school in Newark can graduate students with an associate's degree. That would be powerful. So I'm putting it out there so it can make the note takers notes, yes, right? As something that we really push. That's real equity, every school, right? So if you're not at Bard, at West Side and East Side, you still can get an associate's degree. Isn't that awesome? Awesome. So keep up the good work, and I know that we're going to bring out some other barriers. I am so loving you and begging you to do these last leg of workshops, and I know we done fed you, right, some Italian food, and so you're a little heavier and a little sluggish, but I promise that elevator ride and that walk upstairs is going to transform you. You got to trust me with this, right? And we have this last leg of powerful workshops. And what I love is so perfectly, organically happened. We went through letting the data speak, right? Understanding disproportionality. We went through the disrupting stage. Earlier this morning, we went through setting the conditions. Now we're going to study some promising practices that I think you might not know about. And they are powerful. So if you give yourself a little more time, you're going to be introduced to something that can be life-changing for your students. Isn't that worth it? Right, so come on, I say I feel energized.
Well, that's great, thank you. Just want to thank everybody for participating. Just Dr. Brown, who did an awesome job putting this all together for the last 2 days. Did a great job putting it together. I want to thank her and her staff for making this happen. Awesome conversations. And prayerfully on Monday, we'll all come together and figure out how to implement some of this stuff that was talked about today. Next time, we'll get more participation from the administrations of all of these schools, the MPS, the charters. We'll get the principals, everybody else out here, make them understand how serious this is, that we need them to be present here. So thank you for participating. God bless everybody.